everyone. Welcome to the Space Policy Show. I'm Colleen Stover. Today is episode 108, European Space Policy Perspectives. We've got Dr. Kai-Uwe Schrogl. He's the Special Advisor for Political Affairs to the Director General of the European Space Agency, or ESA, and it's a great honor to have him here. He's also the President of the International Institute of Space Law and the co-chair of the Future Council on Space at the World Economic Forum. Dr. Mick Gleason will be leading the discussion today. He's the Senior Policy Analyst at the Center for Space Policy and Strategy. He's retired Air Force and one of the foremost experts in political science and international affairs in space. So this week's show is a little bit longer than usual. We try to keep it under an hour, which we have done, but Dr. Schrogl had so much great things to say about the differences between the US and Europe, about Europe's acceleration of space into wider audiences, and about their near-term plans that ESA has for the upcoming ministerial council meeting. So glad you could join us today. Stick with it. Over to Mick.
Thanks, Colleen. It's great to have Dr. Kai-Uwe Schrogl here today from the European Space Agency to speak with us about the European space sector and what's going on over in Europe. Thanks for joining us, Kai-Uwe.
Thank you, Mick. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so we'll just get right into it because there's a lot of territory to cover, so to speak, in the European space sector. So for Americans and for other members of the audience who don't really understand the European space policy landscape, so to speak, could you explain like the difference of what are the states in Europe doing, like the French or German space programs, and then maybe what the European Space Agency is doing, and then what the European Union is doing, and how does all that fit together?
Well, you're right, Mick. Europe is complicated. But believe me, the US is also complicated. And this is why I'm so glad to be on the show, because your show is so important for me to learn about the US, about the US space sector, and also about the US policy. So from a perspective from Europe, it's also difficult for us to distinguish between NASA, its field centers, NOAA, the DOD, the DOT, FAA, FCC, the White House, the National Security Council, the Space Council. Well, and if I enumerate all these institutions and all these actors, you might be surprised that Europe might actually be even less complicated than the US sector. So let me say and start with Europe being divided into three actors mainly: the member states, ESA, and the European Union. And actually, each of them have their distinct roles. And if you understand these roles, it's rather easy then to find your way in the institutional setting of Europe. So ESA, the European Space Agency, is the space agency of the European states. We are doing the big programs, large-scale programs, and we will certainly come to that in more details. The European Union has its own applications programs in particular, and the member states, they are the driving force, and they are, I would say, the masters of what is going on in Europe. So they guide the activities of ESA, and they also guide the activities of the European Union, and they have their own programs, national programs. So it's fairly well settled what is going on in Europe. Of course, you always have to balance the powers between these three actors, but this is done in a very good and currently also quite successful way.
So just a point for clarification, if I may, is the three levels I think are very important to understand. Is it accurate to say that ESA is ESA is part of the European Union, or is there some kind of different relationship there?
it is a different relationship. ESA, the European Space Agency, created in already 1975, is a multilateral organization of its own right. So we have a convention which has been signed so far by 22 states. And actually we have 3 member states which are not members of the European Union: the UK, Norway, and Switzerland. And this does not prevent us from, for example, doing work and activities for the European Union. And it's also a real benefit to have these 3 countries because they also have additional inputs, and with the UK, a very good link to the United States.
Okay, thank you. I think that's important for our audience to understand. I've talked to several people who have that a little bit unclear in their mind. So hopefully this has cleared some of that up. So could you talk a little bit about, like, is space considered important in Europe, in the member states, and among the population and within the EU, or in the US? It seems like it's become more prominent and more important over the last 10 years, I think, broadly speaking. How does that work in Europe?
Well, it's the same in Europe. And of course, the war in the Ukraine, the attack of Russia on the Ukraine accelerated that trend. And people now understand and realize that space assets are extremely important, not only for daily life. They already know that because we communicate that very actively: Earth observation, telecommunications, navigations, and so on. But also space is now considered and understood as being of real importance for security, the security of Europe and of the individual member states. And I think this makes space more prominent, very prominent, even as a critical infrastructure, besides the fascination, of course, of space and the inspiration it gives through our astronauts, in particular, the science missions, that the factor of space for security is of growing relevance and importance.
Okay, I'm pleased to hear that. Because, as you know, in the United States, we have been taking it very seriously, especially in the last 10 years. So it's good to hear that we're in sync on that with the Europeans. To circle back just a moment, you mentioned the 3 levels: member states, ESA, and then the EU. It seems to me that there could be a potential for some inefficiencies there with redundant. Like if France or Germany is building a satellite and ESA wants to build a satellite, the European Union has their initiatives. What are the challenges with making sure there's not some gross inefficiencies or duplication of effort and so forth within Europe? Are there some challenges there?
Well, of course, there are challenges, but I think the most prominent and also the easiest reason for avoiding these challenges is that we do not have enough money to really waste it. So our system is quite efficient, I must say. Sometimes it's even good to have redundancies, and competition is also good, competition for ideas. But there will not be, let's say, a mission to Mars by country A and another mission to Mars by country B, or a mission to this or that place, or an application activity by ESA and the same by the European Union. No, I think I made clear that the coordination amongst these 3 actors, and there is no real hierarchy, except that what I said, the member states are the masters of both organizations, that coordination is very good. And one thing also should be mentioned, that while it takes a while for Europe to come to terms and to establish programs and activities, as soon as they are established, And as soon as member states and the organizations have agreed, then you can rely on that. Then we don't stop programs from one year to the other, or we change from here to there. So this is one of the good aspects and the advantages of a system which requires coordination and cooperation, but then has a very big reliability and straightforward way of putting through the programs which have been established.
Well, that's good to hear that there's not too much waste and it's very efficient. Or if there's some redundancy, that's for the good. It's good to have a little redundancy sometimes. I guess so we've talked about member states are the masters, and we have ESA is driven, run by the member states, and then the European Union member states are also the masters there. So where is there room for the private sector in this ecosystem in the European space sector? Is the private sector finding a niche? Or are they coming along as strong as in the US?
Yes, we also have new space, and the private sector has always been, in particular, the large system integrators, but also a fantastic set and very broad field of small and medium-sized enterprises, very creative and very innovative. So they have always been the basis of our activities. Working with the space agencies, these companies have done marvelous things in the field of science and applications, but also in the field of astronautics. So we have a very strong and, as I said, also innovative private sector. And now we are also starting to have real private space activities, which are not depending, or at least not very much depending on governmental money and input. But still, our private sector, our new space sector, is certainly different from what we see in Silicon Valley and what we see from billionaires going into space. So Europe has its own kind of doing new space. And as usual, it's not so dynamic, but, and I refer back to what I just said, we do that possibly a bit slower, a bit more careful and cautious, but then you will see also fantastic results, be it in launches, where you will find certainly in the next 2 years companies doing their own business. And we will, and already have it in the application fields. And this is also one of the nice features of Europe. It's not only one region or one country which is going for that trend, but it's you can find it in almost all member states, of course, in different size and different intensity. But this is the variety which is European and which is successful in the end, also going into international marketplaces.
Well, that sounds fantastic. There's sounds like there's a lot of promise there, just like in the United States and in other countries, a very promising future for private space, commercial space, as they develop their capabilities and find what they can contribute to this new space age, so to speak. Looking to the future again, I noticed that there's a ESA Council at ministerial level coming up in a few weeks. And I know these are big events. They don't happen all very frequently, from what I understand. And so if you could explain a little bit about the significance of ESA Council at ministerial levels and what's to come in a few weeks, what may be announced for ESA's future and European space sector resulting from those announcements potentially.
Yes, Mick, indeed. Thank you for that question. The ESA councils at ministerial level take place every 3 years. And the funding periods are primarily these 3 years, but as you are aware, the programs of ESA cover sometimes more than 10 years. So we are looking ahead when we do these councils. We continue funding, but we also kick off new ideas and new activities. And ESA councils usually cover the whole spectrum of space activities. So the science program is renewed. We do technology programs. We also do programs like funding our business incubation centers, which are so important for initiating business and private activities in Europe, in all our member states. But then again, we are doing large-scale programs in all areas: Earth observation, scientific as well as application-oriented, new ideas for navigation systems. You know, we are now going into the second generation of Galileo, but we are already thinking about the third generation. Telecommunications, secure connectivity in particular, quantum applications for that purpose, but also exploration. Mars missions, as well as a lunar lander. The whole set of space activities, including also space safety and security, plus, and this I should stress, that activities and programs which are related to commercial space activities are taking a very prominent role, be they in Earth observation, be they in other parts traditionally very strong in the field of telecommunications. These are spanning the whole rank of space activities. And last point, the figure we are aiming at, our Director General ambitiously is aiming at, is 18 billion for the next 3-year period. And I think this is quite impressive, even when you compare it with the activities and the budgets in the US. It's really impressive. I'm pleased to say what we are doing with that money and what we are achieving.
I guess I haven't looked at the European Space Agency budget for several years, because that's a lot bigger than I remember 15 years ago. Much larger of a number of a potential budget. Could we untangle a little bit, though, the difference between the European Space Agency budget, because that's not the only pot of money for space activities, right? You once again have the member states have a separate pot of money to develop their own national level space programs, and then the European Union also has a pot of money for their programs. So could you just explain that a little bit? And so collectively, how much might Europe be spending on space in the coming decade?
Well, you can say there are around 10 billion euros per year, which are spent by governments in space in Europe. So ESA has the bulk of it, currently 7 billion, which include around 2 billion, which we are managing on behalf of the European Union. And then there are another 3 billion or so national budgets by the member states. They include civilian as well as military budgets, in particular a very strong military budget of France. Now, these budgets, of course, compared with the US, with NASA in particular, NOAA, but also and in particular DoD, seem very small. But look what we have been accomplishing with them. We are doing all these missions in science, in the applications. Copernicus is now a fantastic reference worldwide for Earth observation. GPS and Galileo are competing about the best accuracy. So I think we have achieved a lot. We have not achieved everything. There are a few blank spots which we try to fill. But we are quite satisfied with what we can accomplish with this amount of money. And this is the good thing. And I come back to the very first question you asked, Nick. Is there a good coordination and cooperation? Yes, indeed, it is. It's also a coordination which rests on specific competencies of the countries, of our member states. So there is one country doing one specific activity, launchers, the other radar technology, the other optical technology, exploration. There are also a good set of distinct competencies throughout Europe in the member states. And this is, I think, something which also makes it efficient. We have often these packages done and put together by the member states. And this certainly also helps to balance, to avoid overlaps, and in the end, to put things together to a joint effort, which is then particularly successful when everybody puts in its own strengths.
Well, that's fantastic. It's in my studies, it was always very impressive how the different European states and organizations, whether it's the EU or ESA or UMETSAT, we haven't talked about, but how all these different space-centric organizations within Europe are able to combine their efforts to maximize efficiency and what the result is. There are a lot of somewhat different terminology than we use in the US. And so circling back a minute, I think it's related to the private sector again. I've heard the term accelerators. Have we talked about that yet?
Well, accelerators is used in two ways. On the one hand, it's business acceleration. So I already said we have in every member state of ESA, we have business incubation centers, which do have the purpose of incubing the businesses, really starting them, getting them off the ground. But then usually after 1 year or 2 years, when they have either to expand or to vanish, the question arises, can we accelerate them? And so we are now also going into this field, which also requires new ways of financing and investing in these companies. So we have our ideas also together with the European Union, other European institutions like the European Investment Bank. But there is also a different accelerator program, which our Director General set up in his strategic agenda 25. So Josef Aschbacher said, we have to approach space activities not from space and space technology as an end of its own, but we have to look at the big political and societal questions and challenges, like the green future, like resilience, like the question of space safety and security. So he said, we have to accelerate the use of space. This is why he uses the term accelerator. He says we have to accelerate the use of space technologies together with the actors in these fields, which means we are extending our activities to different ministries, different sectors of the economy. In the field of green future, we try to really cooperate and coordinate with all the actors which are into the questions which are related to climate change, to environmental security. So this is the new way of accelerating space, not just to increase the budgets of developing space technologies, and also not only to provide good applications. I think we are doing that fairly well, but to really go and make space relevant for the societal big challenges, and doing that together with new actors, with additional institutions, also the private sector and society at large. So that's the new way of approaching space, and this is what Josef Aschbacher calls accelerators.
Wow, I did not know there was so much packed into that word. Accelerator. So I'm gonna make a note right after this to jot down some of those ideas and comprehend more holistically what is meant at ESA in Europe by the word accelerator. Because as you just explained, there's a lot of meaning in there. So definitely good to know what's being talked about when one word is said, that it once again packs in a lot of meaning. So looking again a little bit at the, well, I guess it is the future, is the European Space Agency. I think in the past, maybe in the 90s, they were looking at human spaceflight, a European autonomous capability for human spaceflight. In the meantime, we've had the International Space Station, which ESA has participated in, and several European astronauts from ESA. And so is there any... Is ESA or Europe going to send a person into space based on their own capability anytime in the near or distant future?
Well, that's our plan. It's also part of the strategic agenda of our Director General. And as you alluded to, the 90s, it was the project Hermes, which was a mini shuttle on top of an Ariane 5. It was stopped, much to the distress, I should say, of the space sector, but also the public was quite sad that we did not follow that at that time. It was just too expensive, and the priorities were different. But Josef Aschbacher said, if not now, when? Let's try to convince our politicians, our masters in the member states, that time is good to go also autonomous in the field of human spaceflight. And this is one of the blank spots I indicated too. We are autonomous in almost all fields of space activities, not autark, but autonomous. We are still depending on elements and so on. But we are not autonomous, and we are partners, only junior partners in the field of human spaceflight. And we want to change that. We say we have very much benefited from our partnership with the US, and we are proud to be partners in the ISS. We are also proud to be partners in the new programs, the Gateway, and in particular that NASA is entrusting us with a service module for Orion. This is something which is really fantastic, and which will take us through the 20s, where our partnership in the Gateway in particular shall also lead to European astronauts there. But on the other hand, when we look around, US, Russia, China, now even India, going for human space activities and autonomous capabilities, Europe also has to come up with an idea. Do we want to do that, or will we possibly for the next 10, maybe even 20 years, just remain to be junior partner? And ESA's answer is, of course, yes. There are reasons, geostrategic, international relations reasons, economic reasons, but also societal reasons why we should go for that. We have established a high-level advisory group with personalities from outside the space sector, which shall present us and then the politicians with a view which is not in-house, saying this is the best technology, this is the best plan, or this is the best project. No, they shall come up with ideas why it is so important also for Europe to have an autonomous capability. And I should immediately mention, because that might be your next question, will that be in competition with the US? And I can say no, Mick, it's certainly not. It provides us then with the opportunity of a more mature partnership. And this is something I think which should also be attractive to the US, that Europe as a partner in this field where you can rely on, where you also can take recourse on what we are doing as backups, for example, is something which can be of great benefit, joint benefit also for the future. These are plans, of course, for the 30s, as you can imagine. So this does not at all affect the partnership in the gateway. But then in the 30s, we might see activities also from Europe where we are coordinating our own activities with the activities of the US.
So once again, I'm always amazed at the ambition and the amount of energy and effort being put into European space activities, because often in the US, we don't really understand what's going on very well. So thank you so much for explaining that specifically. I did a little bit off related, not really related to human space flight, but there was a paper that came out, I think by CSIS, a think tank here in Washington, DC, 100 lunar missions going in the next by 2030, something like that. I may have that, not have the exact details right. Is ESA going to be sending missions to the moon, even unmanned, sometime in the next 10 years?
Oh, yes, absolutely. On the agenda for the ministerial conference in a few weeks' time, there will be a large lunar lander for Europe, which is multifunctional, where we plan to have then from 22 onwards, every 2 years, a mission to the moon. And this will be our contribution also to the lunar activities. It will not be going into the hundreds, but you could imagine that the quality of what we will be doing and the challenging technologies we will be applying and the activities we will be performing with this large lunar lander will be top class. And the member states are, I'm pretty sure, looking forward to funding this activity and to join in the technology developments and this program. And I think it will be an asset for exploration of the moon.
So that's I'm looking forward to seeing the success and following what's happening in those areas. So these are all very ambitious, optimistic plans looking forward. But I assume there's some issues in Europe that are similar to issues in the US that we're grappling with in the US. And so I'm wondering, like workforce issues, space traffic management issues, and so on and so forth. So starting with workforce issues, how is the European Space Agency or the member states funding more STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, sciences, education, and trying to inspire younger generations? And how is space playing in that?
Well, we have a very good program on STEM education. It spans from primary over secondary to tertiary education. So the youngest are already try to get engaged and inspired by space. You cannot start with approaching the 17-year-olds. They will not just switch their mind and then go for an engineering university degree. So we try to do that very early on with teachers training, multiplicators, but also with competitions for young people, CANSAT competitions or small rocket competitions, and then at university with the bigger and the major competitions like CubeSats or using our installations, spinning activities. We call it spin your thesis, launch your thesis, fly your thesis, things like that. It's really amazing how much interest there is around in all our member states, and this makes us confident that we also have a new generation or new generations of engineers and scientists. But I must also say that it's getting harder and harder to really bring young people to the tough areas of STEM. They like social sciences, of course, but it's something different to get them engaged then in STEM. This is why we have realized it's really depending on the teachers at an early age to engage young people, and in particular girls, because we still have in engineering less than 20% of the graduates females. So there's quite a lot still to do. And when you look around in the space sector, they are not very happy about the numbers of graduates in European universities. They need more. They have to look also abroad, which is good because you get talent. But we should also increase our efforts to come up with a workforce which is meeting the demand of a growing space sector. So you are right. This is a point where we certainly have to work harder to invest also more. And also to try to change the trend, which is still going into the soft areas and the soft sciences, contrary to the hard ones, which are STEM.
Well, yeah, it's a challenge, I think, all around. Hopefully, those lunar missions you mentioned and the human spaceflight missions will help inspire more young people to get involved, and also the private commercial activities that it's not the government bureaucracies, which can be kind of staid and I don't want to work for a big bureaucracy, but a startup new space type of activities are more exciting and dynamic, according to the reputation here in the U.S. So speaking of the lunar mission, are there any private European companies or initiatives going to try to get to the moon also, besides ESA?
Oh yes, absolutely. We have companies, startups, but also now growing companies, which are providing or which are intent to provide services for moon exploration and moon activities. We are a bit behind, of course, what US companies are also and already doing. But as in the field of the launches, this is a field which is growing, which is also attractive. We see that also when we do our business incubations, that it's not only the Earth observation application company which shall be incubed and set up, but they are also now growing and more promising activities, private activities in this field. And you are absolutely right, Mick. Our astronauts are those who inspire the young generation, but also not only the young generation, but also the elderlies, wherever they are. They are recognized, and people want to pose for a selfie and want to get an autograph. So they are really popular, and we, of course, as you know it, we are using them as ambassadors, and they love it, and because they know they can make the difference when young people consider to do STEM or to go into the aerospace sector. A meeting with an astronaut could really trigger such decisions, and we are really glad that they are so enthusiastic to communicate with the young generation.
Well, that's very inspiring, and if you start putting all those pieces together with the inspirational missions and then the STEM students, and keep creating that ecosystem to keep moving towards the future. I just want to touch upon one more problem area, so to speak, or growing issue, and that's space traffic management. The U.S. with SPD-3 came out in 2018, and the U.S. decided to tackle the growing congestion in space and debris problems and so forth with trying to establish some type of space traffic coordination mechanism for the U.S. and hopefully bring the world in on that. And I heard that in February, I think, of this year, 2022, the EU came out with a space traffic management plan. And so can you talk about that a little bit? And then also the interrelationship with ESA's role in that, and how that will work with the United States or compete with the US on that. So just a couple minutes on that would be great.
Yes, with pleasure, Mick. Of course, this can only be done on an international level and a multilateral level. So we are already in contact, of course, in continuous contact with the US on space traffic management. But we in Europe have to set up our ideas and our plans and strategies, first of all, for our own. It all started, you will know that, with studies from by the International Academy of Astronautics. I was the study lead of the very first international study on space traffic management in 2006. And since then, I also tried to promote space traffic management in Europe, but also in the UN when I was chair of the legal subcommittee of the UN Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. In 2016, we put that on the agenda of the legal subcommittee, space traffic management review or exchange of views by the member states. And with that in mind, we actually tried to launch the initiative to have a European position on space traffic management. The past 2 years, I had been seconded from ESA to the German Economics Ministry at the time of the German Council presidency of the European Union. And I supported that government to provide input from ESA's side for that purpose, in that we set up a line of activities which led to a European space traffic management conference. So this conference was then the starting point of the work, the policy work done in the European Union. And then a few months ago, half a year ago, the policy document you mentioned was published by the European Commission. And since then, we are considering the member states, ESA, together with the European Commission, on how to translate these policy documents into concrete actions and activities. Now, one element certainly is space situational awareness or space surveillance and tracking. And there, Europe is only starting to have a capacity which in the end should also comparable, at least in some areas, with what the US is doing, but we are really far away from that. Nevertheless, we try to set that up in a continuous way. And then we also try to come up with our ideas on how to do the regulatory part, also the standardization parts of space traffic management, also the technologies which are required to accomplish that. ESA is working on autonomous activities, artificial intelligence based also for collision avoidance. So we are working on a number of areas, but we have not yet put that together into one coherent plan. And as soon as we have that, this will then be the time to coordinate even closer with the US in aligning also our ideas and understandings of how it should look like on the international level, because the US is advanced. However, as I understand, SPD3 was not very much and intensely followed up by concrete actions. It's only now that this is taken up again with more speed. So I think we can align our understandings and our plans very well in the near future, because this will be of utmost importance that the US and Europe share the understanding of what and how space traffic management or space traffic coordination should look like, in order then also to bring in the other actors in space in order to make that also a universal system, because everybody should and has to participate, as in air traffic or in frequency management. You should not have any bystanders, and it's therefore extremely important that Europe and the US are on the same line.
Yeah, it's critical that things are aligned, because it is an inherently global environment up there in space, and so you can't have one actor going off and doing one thing and another actor doing another something different, or it won't work. So as the US and the European initiatives evolve, we'll have to keep working closely, I'm sure, together to keep things aligned as closely as possible. So shifting gears and starting to wrap up a little bit, Kai-Uwe, could you talk a little bit you're in some very important positions within the international space forums, and so to speak. If you could name a few of those, because I have a long list here that I could read through, but just some of your key positions out there and what you see in future trends for space policy and law, and then some final thoughts, I think, to wrap things up. But let's just start with the trends in policy and law, and then we'll have a wrap-up question.
Yes, Mick. There are two trends, I would say, and these trends are actually opposing each other. The one trend is that we have a global space economy which is extremely dynamic. Currently, we have around 450 billion euros or dollars of space economy per year, and it will reach, I'm also pretty sure, the 1 trillion mark by 2040. So this is a fantastic, promising, and extremely dynamic trend. On the other hand, we see that the political situation and the security situation in outer space is deteriorating. We see that the actors are not respecting international law anymore. And we also see that conflicts among actors, conflicts among organizations are also getting stronger and more intense. So two opposing trends. And this is something we have to deal with. And I'm afraid that if we let the negative trends go and that we do not stop them or try to handle them, to domesticize them also through, in particular, transparency and confidence building measures, that this will also affect the very good prospects we have in the field of the space economy. So there is a lot of diplomacy which has to be applied, good diplomacy, and I'm sometimes being torn apart, either to be optimistic or pessimistic. But I think that there are a lot of solutions also around, and we just have to find the right way of diplomatically and multilaterally handle the situation.
Well, that's two opposing trends that us as the Center for Space Policy and Strategy, hopefully we can help achieve some solutions in those areas. I guess one final thought in the circles of people I know, we talk about China as a space power, Russia space power, American space power. Should we be considering Europe as a space power also?
Well, it depends what you define as a space power. Certainly, Europe with its capacities and capabilities can be regarded as a space power. I think the quality of what you are doing with your capacities and capabilities is decisive. And when I said that Europe wants to be autonomous in all areas, it is not simply to be autonomous as a goal in itself. We also, as Europeans, want to provide through that the opportunity to have and to create international relations and international cooperation, which might also be a bit different to how the US, Russia, China, others are using their space capabilities and capacities for diplomatic purposes. Now, Europe is traditionally, as we call ourselves, a normative actor based on principles, the rule of law, equitable cooperation and coordination. Now, when we become autonomous in a field like human space exploration, we certainly would not isolate ourselves, but we would use that for the purpose of creating a better environment to cooperate, to coordinate, of course, first of all, with our traditional partner, the US, but then also extend to other countries, space powers or non-space powers, in order to reflect the ideas, European foreign policy and international affairs are based on, which is this normative aspect and the aspect of equitability and cooperation.
Well, that's not quite the answer I was expecting, but nevertheless, very insightful and very interesting. As this whole discussion has been very informative, I've learned a lot. I hope the audience has also learned a lot. Do you have a final thought, and then we should let everybody go?
Well, I'm very grateful that I could be on the show. I love it, and it's fantastic that I had the opportunity today to talk with you, Mick, on all these topics. I know I talk possibly too much and it sounded a little bit too positive, but apologies for my enthusiasm. Nevertheless, I would stress one point, and this is that in Europe, not only the space community, but also the public, the society is really enthusiastic about space, and the trend is there that it's more than the inspiration we get as a society from space, but the deeper understanding now how important space is for our lives and also for our security. And this also opens new and additional ways for cooperation and coordination. And my final word is that Europe regards itself as a partner. Even when we are autonomous, we share our data, we share our experience, and we also want to make the space effort a universal effort.
Well, I'll let that be the last word. Thank you so much, Kai-Uwe. It's been great to have you here and listen to you. And we're all space enthusiasts on this show, so we could talk for several hours more if we had time. But that'll have to be it for today. So I'm going to send it back to Colleen. Colleen, over to you.
Wow, a wonderful amount of insight that Dr. Schrogl has provided us today. Again, it's our honor to have him on the show. And thanks to Mick for leading the discussion. Everyone, go to the website, csps.aerospace.org/space policy show. You can browse all of our past episodes and subscribe to our newsletter there. Follow us on our YouTube channel or your favorite podcast platform, and you'll get instant notifications of new shows as they come out. And thank you, as always, to James Liggins, our technical director. Until next time, everyone.